So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about how to attract pollinators to your gardens using herbs. But the reason we need to do that is if you've looked at any kind of news article or watched the news recently, we all understand that the bee population is in huge decline, along with other really important pollinators, the beautiful things like butterflies and hummingbirds as well. So what we need to do as a whole entire nation is work really hard on restoring the habitat. A lot of plant diversity has gotten lost with buildings. We have less green space and more concrete. Also with all the uses of pesticides and herbicides. Here at Rogers Gardens, we are an all organic garden and we don't sell any harmful pesticides or herbicides. So that's not anything you have to worry about here. But let's talk about the cool things that we plant in our garden to make our gardens more fun and exciting and draw in all those great pollinators. I'm Sarah Smith. I'm a horticulturalist here at Rogers Gardens, and let's get right into it. Fragrant herbs and flowers are particularly good at attracting pollinators and are really fun to have in your garden. So I'm going to show you some of my favorites to plant in your veggie garden. That way you are not only attracting all the great pollinators and creating better diversity, but you also have stuff to use in your garden and to get all of your tomatoes, squash, and zucchinis producing more for you as well. So it's a great win-win situation. In the kitchen, herbs add a lot of flavor and diversity to your food, but they do that with pollinators as well. I think a lot of us too, when we plant herbs, as soon as we see flowers, we go in and we snip them off. If they're a perennial herb, you don't need to do that because that actually attracts all the pollinators to the garden, making your garden more abundant and giving you larger, more beautiful, lush plants. So I'm going to break it down plant by plant so you can know a little bit about them and what their needs are. And then that way you can have a more diverse, beautiful garden and have more unique herbs that you can just go out and pick. So when that recipe calls for something weird and you think, I don't want to run to the grocery store and look for that, you'll have it in your garden. So first up, let's talk about basil. Everybody knows basil. It is so common in Italian cooking. It's such a great thing to add a little pop of green and add a little extra flavor to the garden. But the pollinators love it, and there's a gazillion different types of basil, and here at Rogers we sell a huge group of basil. So there's the traditional nice big leaf basil. Once this flowers, it kind of dies down. So with this one for your kitchen garden, you do want to kind of start pinching off the flowers here and there. A little bit is okay, but if you allow it to go straight to flower, it will just be sticks and flowers. But there's a lot of other varieties that are really amazing, have great flavor, but beautiful flowers and will flower a lot longer and are more like a perennial plant. So we have like lemon basil, Thai basil. African blue basil is one of the best ones for attracting pollinators to the garden. It will be just a buzz with bees in the summer and springtime when those flowers come out. It's a real true hard perennial basil as well. The flavor is a little bit intense. It's really good in things like pestos. I find I don't really like it raw because of the texture, but it's a great beautiful one to have in your garden. Every time it flowers, people constantly ask me if it's lavender, but it's actually a really beautiful basil, but the bees go crazy for it. Up next we have catnip. Catnip is a really great herb. It's not just for felines. It does stimulate felines and gets them all kind of frisky, but it has the opposite effect on humans. It works really well in teas and has a calming effect, great for sleeping and taking right before you go to bed. But it's also a really beautiful landscape herb. It gets a gorgeous white flower. It's very drought tolerant. It spreads and makes a really nice kind of ground cover, and it's perfect for all the insects. The pollinators go crazy for the flowers. So let it go to flower. It is a perennial plant, so you don't have to worry about snipping back the flowers, and very low water, which is great. Fennel is another really attractive, beautiful herb to have in the garden. It has a really gorgeous feathery leaf to it. There's bronze fennel and green fennel, so it works pretty well in any kind of garden. And the umbrella-shaped flowers are gorgeous and super nectar rich, so the pollinators absolutely love it. Just like with dill, they look very similar, so make sure you know which one you have. They both attract bees and all the good little ladybugs who come in and eat your aphids and all your spider mites, so it helps so you don't have to spray as many insecticides in your garden, but it attracts the black-tailed swallow butterflies, and they're absolutely beautiful. Their caterpillars are kind of crazy looking when you see them up close. They almost sort of look like bird poop. So if you see that on your plant, make sure you know what it is and that you know that it's the good thing. That way you don't go spraying for it or try to wipe them off, because those are actually the little baby caterpillars. So it's a really beautiful plant to have in your garden. I particularly love the bronze one because the contrast is just so beautiful. And I have that in the ornamental parts of my garden because it's just such a beautiful herb. If you've ever passed or visited a lavender field, you probably will never forget how gorgeous and how great the smell is. Pollinators will not forget it either. The pollinators love lavender. Lavender is such a diverse herb, great for ornamental, great for attracting those pollinators to get your tomatoes more abundant, and also great for making teas and just bringing in the house for that beautiful, amazing smell that lavender has. There's tons of different types of lavender, so there is a lavender that will 100% go into your garden, that will work with the theme of your garden. They all have that really beautiful purple flower. There's even some that come with like a white and blue flower as well. So it will work in almost any pellet. It's a very low water plant, which is really beautiful as well. And you want to make sure that you don't plant it in soggy soil. It wants really well draining soil. That's the key, and full sun. Almost all the herbs are really looking for full sun, so make sure you have it in the right place to be successful. And if you get all those things right, you're going to have a beautiful, abundant lavender and great flowers as well. Sage is a really familiar herb for most cooks. It has a really deep, rich, strong aroma. I think a lot of us think about it for fall, specifically. Thanksgiving is a very common herb to use during that time of year. But there's a lot of different kinds of sages, and it comes in a lot of beautiful colors, and there's really beautiful ornamental sages. So all sages are salvias, that's the botanical name. This is a really nice cooking one. They come in all kinds of beautiful colors. Grays, purples, tri-colored. This is a particular favorite of mine. This is pineapple sage. The smells fantastic on this. It gets a really beautiful red flower. There's even one called Tangerine Sage that has a really beautiful orange flower. Not only do the hummingbirds and butterflies go crazy for this, but the bees as well. The hummingbirds particularly like the pineapple and tangerine sage, and it's a really beautiful big plant, so be prepared for the size. It starts out like a baby, becomes a full-sized adult down the road. The smaller cooking sages tend to lose their flavor after about 4 or 5 years. So it is a plant, even though it's a perennial, that I do replace every couple of years. But it's a really great border plant, super pretty, great for that Mediterranean look, good as an ornamental planting as well. So I really think it's important for gardeners to really start thinking about the fact that you can incorporate all of these really beautiful herbs into your ornamental plantings. You do not have to have a designated kitchen space just for your herbs, because it works really well. I love to use them in my kitchen spaces just to make them look more ornamental and beautiful. I think my kitchen space garden is actually one of the prettiest parts of my garden, depending on the time of the year. At the end of summer, when the tomatoes are a little crazy, it's a little lacking, but these are really beautiful things to kind of zhuzh up an area like that. Any list of pollinator attracting herbs would be completely incomplete without lemon balm. Lemon balm is actually related to mint, but not nearly as aggressive. It has a really beautiful lemon smell to it, different than any kind of mint, so the name is perfect. It's not as aggressive as regular mint, so it's not something you have to worry about, but the pollinators go gaga for this one when it starts flowering, and it's got this really beautiful, nice green foliage and a great, beautiful white flower. So when it flowers is my favorite time of the year, just like it is for all the pollinators. This here is borage. Borage is a huge pollinator attracting herb. It's so pretty. The leaves are really nice and full and kind of fuzzy, and they have a really amazing electric blue or white flower. The blue one tends to be really popular because there's not a lot of true blue flowers out there, but the bees go crazy for for it. It reseeds freely, so be careful with that. You'll see it coming up here and there throughout the garden. So if you don't want it there, make sure you pull it out before it becomes too monstrous. You can also use the foliage for cooking, and you can use the flowers in all of your desserts and things because it's an edible flower. It has a very light cucumber taste and it looks beautiful added to desserts. I even add it to ice cubes because they look beautiful in a drink once they dissolve and you have the floating flowers in there. It's a really great color and it holds well in that freezed ice cube too. So it's one of my favorites to have in my garden. Many of the tried and true favorite garden herbs are also pollinator attractors if you allow them to flower. I think a lot of people feel nervous about the flowers, so they cut them off because they think it's going to make the foliage not as good, but that's absolutely not true. Things like your rosemary have a beautiful baby blue flower and the bees go nuts for it. Also mint as well, so make sure you keep your mint in a pot because this is aggressive, but mint has a beautiful white flower in the springtime, sometimes a little bit of a baby blush pink, and the pollinators go nuts for it. It will go a little dormant, but then it'll flush back out in the springtime. Oregano has a great white flower, makes a really beautiful ground cover. I love oregano used in pots to kind of spill over the sides to soften things, especially underneath my edible stuff like my fig trees and all of my citrus trees. And last but not least, but one of my favorites is chives. Chives has a really gorgeous flower on it. Some of them have white flowers. They look like an allium flower, so it's a little perfect round puff ball on the top of either white or pink, and the pollinators go crazy for them. And I like to even use those flowers in my edible things like salads and sprinkled on top of things because it adds that beautiful pop of color and just makes everything seem so much more magical. So that's a really beautiful one for flowers as well, but the pollinators also like it as much as we do. So when planning your kitchen gardens, don't forget to add some really gorgeous edible herbs into your garden and things that will help attract the pollinators, because that will make your crops so much more abundant, and it'll just help you in the kitchen because you'll have all those great things that you need, so you don't have to run to the store last minute to grab them. You can also add it into your ornamental landscaping. So a lot of these are great for that, and it's a really beautiful way to incorporate herbs into a garden, especially if you don't have space for a kitchen garden. These are also really good in pots, so if you're working with a small balcony, don't forget these. As long as you're getting good sun, these will all be really happy as well. Make sure you check out our YouTube page and subscribe. Our Facebook and Instagram page is a great follow. There's all kinds of fantastic things there, photographs of all the new things we have coming into the garden, all the limited things that we have, so that way you don't come in and everything's sold out, which is really common here because some of the stuff is super special and limited that we have here at Rogers Gardens. And then make sure that you subscribe for our emails. There's all kinds of great photos, videos, information about what's going on here, so that way you can put things on your calendar and be ready for it. Things like our Christmas opening and our spring opening, that way you know about all the fun things we have going on here at Rogers Gardens. Be well and be safe and happy gardening, everybody. Bye.